As you settle in for the night, imagine yourself stepping back in time to the heart of Renaissance Italy. It is the 15th century, and the world is witnessing an extraordinary rebirth of art, science, and discovery. Among the most celebrated figures of this era is Leonardo da Vinci, a man whose brilliance continues to inspire centuries later. Born in 1452 near the town of Vinci, Leonardo was not only a masterful painter, but also an engineer, scientist, and inventor. From a young age, he was captivated by the natural world, drawing inspiration from everything around him. Whether it was the way birds flew, the flow of water, or the intricate details of the human body. He would go on to study under the renowned artist Andrea del Verrocchio in Florence, where his genius blossomed. Tonight, as we gently explore Leonardo's life, you'll learn about the creation of his masterpieces like the Mona Lisa and the Last Supper, and how his endless curiosity led him to design inventions far ahead of his time. Let this journey through the life of Leonardo da Vinci soothe your mind as his story unfolds in a calm and relaxing narrative. Chapter 1. Early Life and Boundless Curiosity. Our story begins in the serene hills of Tuscany in a small village known as Vinci. It is here, on April 15, 1452, that Leonardo da Vinci was born. His full name, Leonardo di Ser Piero da Vinci, means Leonardo, son of Piero from Vinci. His father, Ser Piero da Vinci, was a wealthy notary, a profession highly respected in Florence at the time, while his mother, Caterina, was a local peasant woman. Though born out of wedlock, Leonardo's childhood was not one of hardship. Instead, it was filled with the beauty of the natural world and the early stirrings of a mind destined for greatness. Leonardo spent much of his early life in the countryside, surrounded by the rolling green hills, vineyards, and olive groves of Tuscany. His mother raised him during his first few years, but, as was customary for the time, Leonardo eventually went to live with his father and extended family. From a young age, it was clear that he possessed an exceptional gift for observation. While other children played, Leonardo would spend hours watching the way birds took flight, how the wind moved through the trees, or how water flowed over stones in a stream. These observations would later become the foundation of his lifelong fascination with the natural world. One of Leonardo's earliest memories, recorded in his later notebooks, was of a kite, a bird of prey, swooping down to his cradle and brushing his face with its tail. While it is unclear whether this was a real memory or a dream, it reflects the vivid imagination and symbolic thinking that would characterize much of his work. Although Leonardo's father was a successful notary, he quickly recognized that his son was not destined for a legal career. Leonardo's artistic talents became apparent early on, and, at the age of 14, his father arranged for him to apprentice with Andrea del Verrocchio, a master painter and sculptor in Florence. Verrocchio's workshop was one of the most prestigious in the city, and it was here that Leonardo would begin his formal training as an artist. Florence, during the 15th century, was a thriving center of art, culture, and innovation. The city was alive with the spirit of the Renaissance, a period of renewed interest in the knowledge of the ancient world and a focus on humanism, science, and the arts. The great artists of the time, such as Botticelli, Ghirlandaio, and Perugino, were Leonardo's contemporaries, and they all worked in or around the workshops and studios of Florence. In Verrocchio's workshop, Leonardo's education went far beyond painting. He learned a wide range of skills, from drawing and sculpture to metalworking and chemistry. he practiced mixing pigments for paint, preparing canvases, and carving marble. But more than that, Verrocchio's workshop was a place where art and science intersected. The young Leonardo was exposed to the study of anatomy, engineering, and architecture, all fields that would later dominate his thinking and become central to his work. One of the first major pieces Leonardo worked on as an apprentice was The Baptism of Christ, a painting by Verrocchio. According to legend, Verrocchio tasked his young apprentice with painting one of the angels in the scene. When Verrocchio saw the angel that Leonardo had painted, he was so impressed by its skill and beauty that he declared he would never paint again, believing that his pupil had surpassed him. While this may be a myth, it underscores the extraordinary talent Leonardo displayed even as a young apprentice. During his time in Florence, Leonardo's curiosity extended far beyond art. He was fascinated by the mechanics of how things worked, whether it was the movement of water, the flight of birds, or the inner workings of the human body. His notebooks from this period are filled with sketches and observations, ranging from architectural designs to studies of anatomy and nature. In one of his earliest known drawings, a pen and ink sketch of the Arno Valley, Leonardo captures the landscape with remarkable detail and accuracy. This drawing, made when he was only 21, demonstrates not only his skill as an artist, but also his keen interest in the world around him. As Leonardo grew older, his insatiable curiosity led him to explore fields far beyond traditional painting and sculpture. He conducted early anatomical studies, dissecting animals to understand the inner workings of muscles, bones, and organs. His fascination with nature and the human body would later lead to some of his most famous anatomical drawings that are still considered masterpieces of observation and precision. But at this stage in his life, it was his deep observation of nature that set him apart. In his notebooks, Leonardo wrote, "Nature is the teacher of all teachers." This sentiment would guide him throughout his life. He was not content to simply accept the world as it appeared. He wanted to understand its deeper mechanisms, the underlying forces that governed the movement of the stars, the flow of rivers, and the beating of the human heart. His relentless pursuit of knowledge would eventually lead him to create inventions far ahead of his time: flying machines, hydraulic systems, and designs for weapons that would not become feasible until centuries later. But in these early years, Leonardo was still very much a student, learning from the masters around him while developing his own unique approach to art and science. He was a young man filled with boundless curiosity, a mind that never rested, always seeking, always exploring. Each day he found new questions to ask, new mysteries to solve, and new ways to express the beauty he saw in the world. Chapter 2: Masterpieces of Art and Exploration. As Leonardo da Vinci grew into adulthood, his talents as an artist and thinker were becoming well known across Florence. The young man who had once been an apprentice under Verrocchio was now emerging as a master in his own right. His works were sought after by noble families, religious institutions, and patrons of the arts. But even as his fame as a painter began to rise, Leonardo's interests reached far beyond the canvas. It was in these years, during the late 1470s and 1480s, that Leonardo embarked on some of the most important projects of his early career. His passion for both art and science intertwined in every piece he created, leading to a style that was unique to him, one that merged technical precision with deep emotional expression. One of his earliest significant commissions was an altarpiece for the Palazzo Vecchio in Florence. Though this project was never completed, It marked the beginning of a pattern in Leonardo's life. Many of his works were left unfinished, not because of a lack of interest or dedication, but because his mind was always reaching for something greater. He was a perfectionist, continually refining his techniques and pushing the boundaries of what art could achieve. In 1481, Leonardo was commissioned to paint the Adoration of the Magi for the monks of San Donato in Scopeto. This complex and ambitious painting was to depict the biblical scene of the three wise men presenting their gifts to the infant Jesus. In the background, a vast, ruined temple looms, symbolizing the decline of the old world and the birth of a new spiritual order. Although Leonardo would leave this painting unfinished when he moved to Milan, the work remains a stunning example of his ability to blend religious symbolism with architectural detail and human emotion. As you imagine this unfinished masterpiece, picture Leonardo at work in his studio. The scene is alive with movement, the curious expressions of the Magi, the crumbling temple walls, and the serene figure of the Virgin Mary holding her child. Leonardo's brush strokes capture not just the visual elements of the scene, but the deep sense of mystery and reverence that it evokes. But Leonardo's ambitions were not limited to religious art. His reputation as a master of portraiture was growing, and his ability to capture the essence of a person on canvas was unrivaled. One of his most famous early portraits is Ginevra de' Benci, painted around 1474. In this painting, Leonardo breaks away from the stiff, formal style of portraiture that was common in Renaissance Italy. Instead, he creates a portrait that is filled with life and emotion. The young woman gazes outward with a calm yet thoughtful expression, her face framed by delicate curls and set against a backdrop of lush greenery. This portrait is significant not only for its beauty, but for the technical skill Leonardo employed. His mastery of sfumato, the technique of blending colors and tones to create a soft, almost smoky effect, can be seen in the subtle shading of Ginevra's face. The result is a lifelike quality that had rarely been achieved in portraiture before. As you imagine this portrait, picture the serene yet thoughtful expression of the young woman, her features softened by Leonardo's gentle touch. It was around this time that Leonardo's interests in the natural world deepened. He began to keep extensive notebooks filled with sketches and observations of the world around him. He studied plants, animals, and the human body with the same intensity he applied to his art. In one of his notebooks from this period, he wrote, "Observe how the trees are reflected in the water, but upside down. Nature is full of such marvels." These observations reveal Leonardo's deep fascination with the natural world and his desire to understand it in all its complexity. In 1482, Leonardo left Florence for Milan, where he entered the service of Ludovico Sforza, the Duke of Milan. This move marked a new phase in Leonardo's life, one that would be defined not only by his art, but by his contributions to science and engineering. Milan, at that time, was one of the most important cities in Italy, a hub of culture, politics, and military power. Leonardo saw in Milan the opportunity to not only continue his work as an artist, but also to engage in projects that combined art, architecture, and engineering. One of Leonardo's first major commissions in Milan was The Virgin of the Rocks, a painting created for the Confraternity of the Immaculate Conception. This painting, which exists in two versions, is one of the most beautiful and mysterious of Leonardo's works. It depicts the infant Jesus and John the Baptist, along with the Virgin Mary and an angel, set against a dark, rocky landscape. The figures are bathed in soft light, and their expressions are filled with a quiet sense of awe and reverence. What sets this painting apart is the way Leonardo integrates the figures into the landscape. The rocky outcrops, the flowing water, and the distant mountains all seem to be part of the same natural world as the human figures, creating a sense of unity between man and nature. This blending of the natural and the divine is a hallmark of Leonardo's work, and it reflects his belief that the beauty of nature was a reflection of a higher spiritual order. But even as Leonardo worked on this masterpiece, his mind was turning to other pursuits. His notebooks from this period are filled with designs for inventions, flying machines, weapons of war, and hydraulic systems. One of his most famous sketches is the design for an armored vehicle, an early version of what we might call a tank today. Although these inventions were never built in Leonardo's lifetime, they demonstrate his visionary thinking and his desire to push the boundaries of what was possible. In addition to his work on military inventions, Leonardo was deeply interested in the study of anatomy. He dissected human cadavers, carefully sketching the muscles, bones, and organs with incredible accuracy. His anatomical drawings are not only scientifically precise but also artistically beautiful, capturing the delicate balance and harmony of the human body. It was during this period that Leonardo began work on what would become one of his most famous and enduring masterpieces, The Last Supper. Painted on the wall of the dining hall at the convent of Santa Maria delle Grazie in Milan, this mural depicts the moment when Jesus tells his disciples that one of them will betray him. The expressions on the faces of the apostles range from shock to disbelief, capturing the emotional intensity of the moment. The Last Supper is a testament to Leonardo's ability to convey human emotion with subtlety and depth. The composition of the painting is carefully arranged to draw the viewer's eye to the figure of Jesus in the center, while the gestures and expressions of the apostles create a dynamic sense of movement and drama. Unfortunately, Leonardo's experimental technique for this mural, using oil on plaster instead of traditional fresco, caused the painting to deteriorate quickly. Despite this, it remains one of the most iconic works of Western art. As you picture the Last Supper, imagine the solemn faces of the apostles as they react to Jesus' words. Picture Leonardo standing before the mural, carefully applying each brushstroke, bringing to life a moment of profound spiritual significance. In this chapter of his life, Leonardo da Vinci was not just an artist. He was a visionary, an inventor, and a scientist. His mind was constantly moving, filled with ideas for new inventions, new ways of understanding the world, and new ways of expressing the beauty he saw in everything around him. As you drift off to sleep, let your thoughts follow Leonardo through the streets of Milan, his mind brimming with endless possibilities, his heart filled with a deep love for both art and discovery. Chapter 3. The Scientist and Inventor. As Leonardo da Vinci's reputation as a master artist continued to grow, so too did his insatiable thirst for knowledge. By the time he had settled in Milan under the patronage of Ludovico Sforza, Leonardo was no longer just a painter. He was becoming something much more. His mind was bursting with ideas that stretched far beyond the canvas, into the realms of engineering, anatomy, architecture, and the natural sciences. In many ways, Leonardo was the very embodiment of the Renaissance man, a person whose interests and expertise spanned an astonishing range of subjects. In the 1490s, Leonardo's curiosity led him to some of the most groundbreaking and forward-thinking pursuits of his time. He was driven by a deep desire to understand how the world worked, from the intricate mechanics of the human body to the vast forces of nature. He believed that by observing and studying the world around him, he could uncover the hidden laws of the universe. His notebooks from this period reveal a mind constantly at work, filled with sketches, diagrams, and notes written in his signature mirror writing, a technique Leonardo used, perhaps as a way of keeping his thoughts private, or simply out of habit as a left-hander. One of Leonardo's most profound fascinations was with the human body. His study of anatomy began as early as the 1480s, but it was during his time in Milan that he began to systematically dissect human cadavers, a practice that was highly unusual for an artist of his time. With meticulous care, he recorded his observations in his notebooks, producing some of the most detailed and accurate anatomical drawings ever made. Leonardo's anatomical studies were far ahead of his time. He dissected and carefully examined every part of the human body, muscles, bones, tendons, and organs, seeking to understand how each part functioned in relation to the whole. His drawings of the human skeleton and muscular structure are masterpieces in themselves, not just for their scientific precision, but for their beauty. The shading, the attention to detail, and the lifelike rendering of each part demonstrate Leonardo's ability to combine art and science seamlessly. One of his most famous anatomical studies is the drawing of a human fetus in the womb, a study that remains remarkable not only for its accuracy, but for the empathy and tenderness with which it was drawn. Leonardo's understanding of human physiology was so advanced that his drawings of the human heart and circulatory system would not be surpassed until centuries later. In his notes, he often referred to the human body as the machine, marveling at its complexity and the perfect harmony with which its parts functioned together. Imagine Leonardo, late at night, bent over a table in a dimly lit room, carefully dissecting a cadaver, his quill scratching across the page as he documents each discovery. His studio is quiet, save for the soft rustle of paper and the flicker of candlelight. In these quiet moments, Leonardo is not only an artist but a scientist, unraveling the mysteries of life itself. But Leonardo's interests were not limited to the human body. His notebooks from this period also reveal a deep fascination with the natural world. He studied the flight of birds, the flow of water, the growth of plants, and the movement of the stars. He believed that nature held the key to understanding the universe, and he devoted much of his life to studying its patterns and forces. One of his most famous drawings is The Vitruvian Man, a study of human proportions based on the writings of the ancient Roman architect Vitruvius. This drawing, which depicts a man standing in two superimposed positions with his arms and legs outstretched, is not just a study of anatomy. It is a symbol of Leonardo's belief in the harmony between man and nature. The perfectly balanced proportions of the human body, as represented in the Vitruvian Man, reflect the order and symmetry that Leonardo saw in the world around him. Leonardo's work in engineering and invention also flourished during this time. His mind was constantly churning with new ideas for machines, devices, and structures that had never been seen before. Many of these inventions were centuries ahead of their time, and while most were never built during his lifetime, they laid the groundwork for future generations of engineers and inventors. One of Leonardo's most famous inventions is his design for a flying machine, often called the ornithopter. Leonardo was fascinated by the idea of human flight, and he spent countless hours studying the wings of birds, bats, and insects. He believed that by replicating the mechanics of bird flight, humans could one day soar through the skies. His design for the ornithopter featured wings that flapped, powered by a human pilot pedaling beneath them. Although the ornithopter was never constructed, it is a testament to Leonardo's visionary thinking. He also sketched designs for a variety of other machines, including early concepts for a helicopter, a parachute, and even a glider. In one of his notebooks, he wrote, "Once you have tasted flight, you will walk the earth with your eyes turned skyward, for there you have been, and there you will long to return." Although Leonardo himself never flew, his dream of human flight would one day be realized, centuries after his death. In addition to his work on flying machines, Leonardo designed numerous other mechanical devices. His notebooks are filled with sketches of cranes, hydraulic pumps, gears, and levers. He devised plans for an armored vehicle, which is considered one of the earliest prototypes of a modern tank. This design featured a domed, turtle-like structure mounted on wheels, with a series of cannons extending from its sides. Although the technology of the time was not advanced enough to bring this invention to life, it shows how Leonardo was constantly thinking ahead, imagining solutions to problems that hadn't even arisen yet. Leonardo's engineering mind also extended to the study of water. He was fascinated by the movement of rivers, tides, and currents, and he proposed several ambitious projects aimed at controlling and harnessing the power of water. One such project was the design for a system of canals to make the Arno River navigable between Florence and Pisa. While this project was never completed, his studies of hydrodynamics contributed significantly to the field. In his observations of water, Leonardo's drawings often show intricate whirlpools, waves, and spirals. Patterns he saw reflected in everything from the way hair curls to the swirling of the stars in the night sky. His belief that nature's patterns could be found in both the smallest and largest scales was revolutionary, and it influenced his approach to everything from art to science. As you imagine Leonardo sitting by the banks of a river, sketching the ripples and eddies in the water, let your mind drift like the current, peaceful and steady. In this moment, Leonardo is not just an artist or a scientist. He is a dreamer, imagining how the forces of nature might be harnessed for the benefit of mankind. During his time in Milan, Leonardo was also involved in architectural projects. One of his grandest designs was for the construction of a massive equestrian statue, commissioned by Ludovico Sforza to honor his father, Francesco Sforza. This statue, known as the Gran Cavallo, was intended to be the largest equestrian statue in the world, standing at over 24 feet tall. Leonardo spent years working on the design and even created a full-sized clay model of the horse. Unfortunately, the project was never completed, as the bronze intended for the statue was repurposed for military use during a time of war. Although the Gran Cavallo was never cast in bronze, Leonardo's detailed sketches of the horse reveal his deep understanding of both anatomy and engineering. The muscular form of the horse is rendered with incredible precision, and the statue's design demonstrates Leonardo's ability to think on a monumental scale. Today, his designs for the Gran Cavallo remain a testament to his ambition and his mastery of form. Leonardo's contributions to the world of science, invention, and engineering were as vast and varied as his artistic achievements. His mind moved seamlessly between disciplines, always seeking connections between the natural and the man-made, between art and science. To Leonardo, there was no boundary between these worlds. They were simply different expressions of the same fundamental truths. Chapter 4. The Later Years and Legacy. As Leonardo da Vinci moved through the middle and later stages of his life, his restless curiosity never waned. By the early 1500s, he had already left an indelible mark on the worlds of art, science, and engineering. But Leonardo was far from finished. His later years would see him create some of his most iconic masterpieces, deepen his studies in anatomy and invention, and leave a legacy that would echo throughout the centuries. In 1503, Leonardo returned to Florence, where he embarked on what would become one of the most famous works of art in history, the Mona Lisa. Known in Italian as La Gioconda, this portrait of a Florentine woman named Lisa del Giocondo would become an icon of art, celebrated for its mystery and beauty. But in Leonardo's time, it was just one of many portraits he worked on. What set it apart, even in his own era, was the lifelike quality that Leonardo was able to capture. Using his mastery of sfumato, the technique of blending light and shadow, he rendered the delicate smile of the Mona Lisa with such subtlety that it seems to change depending on how the viewer looks at it. Picture Leonardo in his studio, carefully applying thin layers of paint to create the delicate transitions between light and dark. His brush moves slowly, with precision, as he works to capture not just the physical likeness of his subject, but the inner life behind her serene expression. The painting took him years to complete, and he continued to refine it even after he had moved on to other projects. Today, the Mona Lisa is housed in the Louvre Museum in Paris, where millions of visitors from around the world come to marvel at the masterpiece, captivated by her enigmatic smile. Around the same time, Leonardo began work on another monumental project, the Battle of Anghiari. This was to be a vast fresco, commissioned to decorate the walls of the Palazzo Vecchio in Florence. The painting depicted a famous battle between the Florentine forces and their enemies, and Leonardo set about creating a scene filled with action, movement, and drama. His sketches for the Battle of Anghiari are filled with powerful images of soldiers, horses, and weapons, all caught in the heat of battle. But, as with many of his projects, the fresco was never completed. Leonardo's experimental technique, involving oil paints on plaster, began to fail, and the work was abandoned. Despite this, the Battle of Anghiari remains one of Leonardo's most celebrated unfinished works. The intensity and energy captured in his preliminary sketches reveal a side of Leonardo that was as much about movement and force as it was about beauty and grace. As you imagine this grand mural, picture the clash of swords, the charging horses, and the fierce determination on the faces of the soldiers. Even in this chaotic scene, Leonardo found a way to bring out the humanity of each figure, making them not just actors in a battle, but individuals with emotions and stories of their own. In 1506, Leonardo was invited back to Milan, this time by Charles d'Amboise, the French governor of the city. It was during this second stay in Milan that Leonardo's scientific studies intensified. He had already become deeply involved in the study of anatomy, but now, with more time and access to resources, he took his research even further. He dissected numerous human cadavers, making detailed drawings of muscles, bones, and internal organs. His anatomical sketches from this period are considered some of the most precise and beautiful ever created. Leonardo was not only studying the body to understand its structure, but also to explore how it moved and functioned. His anatomical studies culminated in a series of drawings that charted the entire structure of the human body, from the skeleton to the muscles to the veins and arteries. His drawing of the human heart, for example, was so accurate that modern medical professionals have marveled at the detail and understanding it displays. Leonardo's investigations into the human body were not merely scientific, they were also deeply artistic. He viewed the body as a perfect machine, one that operated according to the harmonious laws of nature. But Leonardo was not only fascinated by the human body, he was also deeply interested in the natural world. During his time in Milan, he studied the flight of birds, the movement of water, and the growth of plants with the same intensity that he applied to his anatomical work. His notebooks from this period are filled with sketches of swirling water currents, the delicate structure of leaves, and the way light played across the surface of rivers and lakes. He sought to understand how these natural forces worked, believing that nature held the key to unlocking the mysteries of the universe. In 1513, Leonardo moved to Rome, where he found himself surrounded by some of the greatest artists of the time, including Michelangelo and Raphael. Rome was a city steeped in history, art, and religion, and it provided Leonardo with new opportunities to explore his ideas. However, during his time in Rome, he found himself increasingly drawn to scientific pursuits, particularly in the fields of engineering and hydraulics. He designed systems for draining swamps, created plans for irrigation, and even developed ideas for improving the city's defenses. Despite his brilliance, Leonardo often found himself at odds with the politics of the time. He struggled to gain patronage for some of his more ambitious projects, and many of his ideas, though groundbreaking, were never realized. Still, his notebooks from this period reveal a mind that was constantly working, constantly imagining new possibilities. It was during his time in Rome that Leonardo also began to explore ideas for using solar power, conceptualizing ways to harness the sun's energy for practical purposes. He even sketched designs for a machine that could concentrate solar rays, an idea that was centuries ahead of its time. Leonardo's inventive mind knew no boundaries, and even in his later years, he was thinking about how his ideas could benefit future generations. In 1516, Leonardo accepted an invitation from King Francis of France to move to the Château du Clos Lucé, a manor house near the royal Château d'Amboise. King Francis admired Leonardo not only for his artistic genius, but for his brilliant mind and innovative thinking. The king treated Leonardo with great respect, and Leonardo spent the last years of his life in France, working on various projects and continuing his studies in anatomy, architecture, and hydrodynamics. It was during these final years that Leonardo began work on what would become one of his most mysterious and beautiful paintings, St. John the Baptist. In this work, Leonardo depicted the saint with an otherworldly grace, his face lit by a soft, ethereal glow, his finger pointing heavenward. The painting is filled with the kind of spiritual depth and symbolism that Leonardo had always been drawn to, and it remains one of his most enigmatic creations. Leonardo's time in France was peaceful and productive, though he often reflected on the many projects he had left unfinished. He continued to fill his notebooks with sketches, diagrams, and thoughts on everything from the nature of light to the mechanics of flight. Though his health began to decline, Leonardo remained active and engaged with the world around him until the very end. On May 2, 1519, Leonardo da Vinci passed away in the Château du Clos Lucé at the age of 67. It is said that King Francis was by his side, holding his hand as he died, though this account may be more legend than fact. What is certain is that Leonardo's death marked the end of an extraordinary life, one that had touched nearly every field of human endeavor. Even in death, Leonardo's influence continued to grow. His notebooks, filled with thousands of pages of sketches, ideas, and observations, became a treasure trove for future generations of artists, scientists, and engineers. His works, from the Mona Lisa to the Last Supper, remain among the most celebrated masterpieces in the history of art. And his visionary ideas, many of which were never realized in his own lifetime, would inspire countless inventors and thinkers in the centuries to come. As you imagine Leonardo's final years in France, picture him walking through the gardens of the Château du Clos Lucé, reflecting on a lifetime of discovery and creation. His mind, though aging, was still filled with the same boundless curiosity that had driven him throughout his life. And though he left many of his projects unfinished, Leonardo da Vinci's legacy was anything but incomplete. He had redefined what it meant to be an artist, an inventor, and a thinker. He had shown the world that creativity and curiosity had no limits, that the pursuit of knowledge was a lifelong journey, and that the mysteries of the universe could be explored through both science and art. Chapter 5. The Renaissance Mind and Unfinished Dreams. Leonardo da Vinci's life was one of incredible achievement, but it was also marked by an endless stream of unfinished projects. For all his brilliance, his mind was so vast, his interests so varied, that he rarely completed many of the works he began. Yet, far from being a flaw, this characteristic is part of what made Leonardo the quintessential Renaissance man. His insatiable curiosity and boundless imagination meant he was always chasing new ideas, always exploring new possibilities, never content to limit himself to one field or discipline. In many ways, Leonardo's uncompleted projects tell us just as much about him as the masterpieces he finished. They reveal a mind that was constantly in motion, moving from one idea to the next, seeking not perfection but discovery. Leonardo was driven by the pursuit of knowledge, and for him, the journey of learning was often more important than the destination. One of the most famous examples of Leonardo's unfinished work is the massive equestrian statue of Francesco Sforza, known as the Gran Cavallo. In the 1480s, Leonardo had been commissioned to create this monument to honor the Duke of Milan's father. It was to be a colossal statue, towering over the city as a symbol of power and strength. Leonardo spent years designing the horse, meticulously studying the anatomy of real horses to ensure that every muscle and tendon was rendered with perfect accuracy. He even created a full-scale clay model of the horse, which was admired by all who saw it. However, due to political and financial upheavals in Milan, the bronze that was meant to be used for the statue was repurposed for cannons during a time of war. The clay model was eventually destroyed, and the statue was never completed. Despite this, the sketches and designs for the Gran Cavallo remain some of the most detailed and beautiful studies of equine anatomy ever made. They capture Leonardo's incredible attention to detail, his deep understanding of form and structure, and his ability to imagine on a grand scale. As you picture this magnificent statue, imagine Leonardo standing before his massive clay model, his hands covered in clay, carefully sculpting each curve and contour of the horse's body. The project may have been abandoned, but the vision behind it lives on in the pages of his notebooks, a testament to his endless drive to push the boundaries of art and engineering. Another of Leonardo's most ambitious yet unfinished projects was his work on flight. Fascinated by the idea of human flight, Leonardo spent years studying birds, bats, and insects, sketching their wings and observing how they moved through the air. He believed that by understanding the mechanics of flight in nature, he could create a machine that would allow humans to soar through the skies. His notebooks are filled with designs for flying machines, some that resemble modern helicopters, others that look more like gliders or wings powered by human strength. One of his most famous designs is the ornithopter, a machine with large, bird-like wings that a pilot would operate by pedaling. Leonardo believed that with the right balance and force, a human could achieve flight, much like a bird. Although none of these flying machines were ever built during Leonardo's lifetime, they represent his visionary thinking. He was not content to simply dream about flight. He wanted to understand it, to study its mechanics, and to bring it into reality. His notebooks reveal detailed diagrams of pulleys, levers, and gears, all designed to make his flying machines functional. He even studied the effects of air resistance and gravity, concepts that would not be fully understood until centuries later. As you drift off to sleep, imagine Leonardo gazing up at the sky, watching birds soar above him, his mind filled with dreams of flight. His hands move across the page, sketching designs for machines that might one day allow humans to join the birds in the sky. The quiet hum of his thoughts fills the room, and in his mind, he is already flying. Leonardo's fascination with the natural world extended beyond flight. He was deeply interested in the forces that shaped the earth, water, wind, and the movement of celestial bodies. His notebooks are filled with sketches of whirlpools, waves crashing against rocks, and swirling patterns in rivers and streams. He studied the flow of water with a scientist's eye, trying to understand how it moved, what caused it to change direction, and how humans might one day harness its power. One of his most ambitious ideas was a plan to divert the course of the Arno River, which ran through Florence. Leonardo believed that by redirecting the river, he could create a system of canals that would make Florence a major maritime power, linking the city to the Mediterranean Sea. He designed a series of locks and dams that would control the flow of water, allowing ships to travel freely between Florence and the sea. Although this project was never realized, it demonstrates Leonardo's forward-thinking approach to engineering and his belief that humans could shape the natural world to their advantage. Imagine Leonardo standing by the banks of the Arno, watching the water flow past, his mind filled with ideas for how to control and harness its power. His hands are busy sketching plans for canals, locks, and dams, his thoughts racing ahead to a time when his ideas might become reality. The sound of the river's gentle flow echoes in the background, as steady and calm as Leonardo's unrelenting pursuit of knowledge. Another of Leonardo's unfinished works was his treatise on anatomy. Throughout his life, Leonardo had conducted detailed studies of the human body, dissecting cadavers to understand how muscles, bones, and organs functioned together. His drawings of the human body are masterpieces of both art and science, filled with minute details and precise measurements. He had planned to compile these studies into a comprehensive treatise on anatomy, one that would combine his artistic renderings with scientific explanations of how the body worked. Unfortunately, Leonardo never completed this treatise. His notebooks, though filled with hundreds of anatomical drawings and observations, remained unpublished in his lifetime. It would be centuries before many of his anatomical discoveries were fully understood or appreciated. Yet even in their unfinished state, these works have had a profound impact on both art and medicine. Leonardo's ability to combine beauty and precision in his studies of the human form set a new standard for both artists and scientists. As you imagine Leonardo working late into the night, his quill scratching across the page, picture the detailed sketches of muscles, bones, and tendons taking shape before him. His mind is focused, his hands steady, as he draws the intricate workings of the human body with unparalleled accuracy. Though he may never complete his treatise, his work has already changed the way the world understands the human form. In the end, many of Leonardo's dreams and ideas remained unfinished. But rather than seeing these as failures, they are a reflection of the vastness of his mind. A mind that was always seeking, always imagining, always striving for something more. Leonardo was not limited by the boundaries of his time. He was constantly reaching beyond what was known, beyond what was possible, into the realm of dreams. His unfinished works are part of his legacy. They remind us that the pursuit of knowledge is never truly complete, that there is always more to learn, more to discover. Leonardo's life was not defined by what he left unfinished, but by the endless creativity and curiosity that drove him to explore every corner of the natural world. Chapter 6. The Eternal Legacy of Leonardo da Vinci. As we reach the final chapter in the story of Leonardo da Vinci, it becomes clear that his life was not just about the works he completed or the innovations he brought into the world. His true legacy lies in the way he inspired generations to come, the way his boundless curiosity, unmatched creativity, and unquenchable thirst for knowledge set him apart as one of history's most remarkable figures. Even in his later years, as Leonardo settled into his peaceful home in France at the Château du Clos Lucé, his mind never stopped racing. He continued to explore, to sketch, and to dream of new possibilities. Though his body grew older, his spirit remained young, ever eager to learn more about the world he had spent his life studying. The walls of his study were covered in notes and diagrams, plans for inventions that might never be built, ideas for paintings that might never see completion, and observations on the natural world that would resonate for centuries to come. By the time of his death in 1519, Leonardo had already become a legend. He had lived through one of the most transformative periods in history, the Italian Renaissance, helping to shape it through his contributions to art, science, and engineering. Kings and scholars sought his counsel, artists and architects studied his techniques, and inventors marveled at his vision. But Leonardo was not just a man of his time. He was a man for all time, a figure whose influence would continue to grow long after his passing. In the centuries that followed, Leonardo's notebooks were discovered, revealing the full breadth of his genius. These pages, filled with sketches of flying machines, designs for hydraulic systems, anatomical studies, and philosophical musings, opened the world's eyes to the true extent of Leonardo's intellect. His ideas, some of which had seemed impossible in his own time, began to take on new meaning in the modern world. Leonardo's scientific discoveries in anatomy, hydrodynamics, and engineering laid the foundation for future breakthroughs. His inventions, though never built in his lifetime, inspired the minds of later engineers and scientists who would bring these ideas to life. The seeds Leonardo had planted in his notebooks, ideas that were ahead of their time, finally began to bloom. But perhaps Leonardo's greatest legacy is in his approach to the world. He showed us that art and science are not separate disciplines, but two sides of the same coin. He demonstrated that the pursuit of beauty and the search for knowledge are one and the same, that to truly understand the world, we must study both its form and its function. He believed that nature held the answers to the universe's deepest questions, and that by observing the world with both an artist's eye and a scientist's mind, we could unlock its mysteries. Even today, Leonardo's works continue to captivate and inspire. The Mona Lisa smiles enigmatically at millions of visitors in the Louvre, her gaze as mysterious and timeless as ever. The Last Supper remains one of the most studied and admired paintings in the world, its depiction of human emotion still resonating with viewers after 5 centuries. And Leonardo's sketches, whether of flying machines, human anatomy, or the forces of nature, are still regarded as masterpieces of both art and science. As you drift off to sleep, let the legacy of Leonardo da Vinci inspire you. His life was a reminder that there is always more to discover, more to learn, and more to create. He taught us that the world is full of wonders, waiting to be observed, explored, and understood. His spirit of curiosity and invention lives on in all of us, in every question we ask, every dream we chase, and every new idea we pursue. Imagine Leonardo in the twilight of his life, walking through the gardens of the Château du Clos Lucé, the soft breeze carrying with it the scent of flowers and the sound of birds. His heart is full, not with regret for the things he left unfinished, but with satisfaction for the endless journey of discovery that had defined his life. His mind, though aged, still dances with ideas and possibilities, forever curious, forever exploring. Let his story remind you that it is not the completion of a task that matters most, but the joy of learning, the thrill of discovery, and the endless pursuit of knowledge and beauty. Leonardo's life, filled with dreams both realized and unrealized, is a testament to the power of imagination and the enduring nature of human creativity.